Is Bitcoin about to do the unthinkable and go under $100,000? 100,000 highly inflated US dollars, the old 6-digit Bitcoin. And we'll just focus on where we kind of left off on yesterday's video, which was essentially saying that, hey, short-term correction, more like the same things we've been looking at for the past week as Bitcoin has remained steadily above $100,000. But of course, all runs do experience, at least at some point, a counter move. And I do believe that Bitcoin is kind of gearing up for that right here, right now, and likely does play it over the next week or so. Now, moving down my notes and making sure that I got everything in order here, I do want to first really focus on actually the stablecoin dominance chart that we've been following coming in from the last couple weeks, and it has finally found an area that makes sense for a bounce. And of course, stablecoin dominance we expect to play inversely of Bitcoin spot price action and cryptocurrencies in general. And seeing as this one has come down to that white 200 moving average and is finally, holding on its ground there, I am looking at this as very, very likely at least a short and potentially even medium term reversal, as we do see not only it hold on to that 200 simple and have a nice little bounce, but it is also showing that daily stochastic momentum is freshly crossing the upside here and does have a very slight amount of bullish divergence. In fact, when we go over to our daily RSI as well, we can see that the daily RSI has a very, very, very slight amount of bullish divergence here as well. So I like these two things working together. And of course, this thing can easily afford, a nice little bounce while still remaining in an overall downtrend, which would be the more, I guess, medium to long-term bullish view for Bitcoin and the rest of the cryptos. But, does this thing bounce up at least to 670? Yeah, I think so. Does it bounce up perhaps all the way to, 7% or maybe a little bit above 7%? That'd be my next sort of area of interest. And I personally think that it will get somewhere around there. But ultimately, it is still a bearish chart, at least on the daily, as long as this thing is below 740, the last price action pivot from the 6th of May high. So while I would say that, this thing is likely to bounce, meaning that Bitcoin is likely to pull back, it's not necessarily a death sentence just yet. This is a pullback within an overall greater uptrend. Now, greater uptrend can reverse as well, but I do want to take this one step at a time because I don't want to be, getting too far ahead of ourselves here, especially with the way that the higher term timeframes look, especially, on something like this, which still looks to me that it is more likely to head further south before everything is said and done than actually just bottom here and go, full fucking bull mode. Anyways, moving on from there, I do want to now address the old Bitcoin momentum over here. We've been following this as well. We've been waiting for the daily, the 2-day, and the 3-day timeframes to start to align, and I believe that we have seen that as of the last couple of days, and now it is following through. So the daily timeframe also has bearish divergence here on the daily stochastic oscillator and is now crossing down and actually seeming like it actually has some momentum to the downside as long as Bitcoin's below 105. And if you recall from yesterday's video, that pivot very specifically has now shifted up, which is usually, a counter signal. So that would mean that price action more likely to come down. And if it does lose the critical zone, it would be the first time losing this critical zone since, the 20th of April. So that was what, like 2, 3, 4 weeks ago now, like nearly a month ago now. So, that is significant, and that would signal that at least we're entering into probably more of a medium term correction for Bitcoin. And of course, when we go over to the 2-day time frame as well, we can see that this one is also coming down here. The pivot for this one is 104,000 US dollars, and that one actually just updated as of last night. And we got the 3-day time frame over here, which is updating tonight, and this one's already hinting at across the downside, but it will follow through below 103, almost even there. So Bitcoin below all these pivots as of right now. Of course, the 5-day time frame, continues to the upside. All of the other very higher term time frames continue to remain upside angled, although this one is starting to get into the critical zone. But that does make me think at least a pullback wouldn't get super bearish just yet, although it is of course possible. But Bitcoin could easily come back down, 98, 99,000 bucks, and at least have a short-term bounce there, and perhaps even salvage itself there. Now, we should go over some of the price action pivots as well. The 4-hour time frame we were looking at as yesterday to kind of govern this current consolidation. That one remains steady here at about just below 105,000 US dollars, meaning that as long as Bitcoin's below there, you do have a short-term downtrend, still in place. And we go over to the 12-hour time frame, we can see that this is actually about to switch over as well. So in yesterday's video, we did acknowledge that there was obviously an upside price action pivot pivot, that was at 100,800. And we can see a developing new price action pivot to essentially the same area as the full hour, just below $105,000. If Bitcoin does close this next 12-hour dildo, basically here or lower, you will see that start to emerge, and that will give, a further downside bias alongside momentum also coming down, here as well, with bearish divergence here too. So, I do look at all these things kind of working together, and seeing as we're starting to see these ones switch into a bearish pivot, that does suggest that short/medium term Bitcoin more than likely corrective here, especially when we consider the higher term timeframes like the daily, which still shows the most recent price action pivot at 93,500. Bitcoin can pull back here and still put in a higher low, to be fair, or at least have a nice bounce. Anyways, I want to reiterate before we go on though, the monthly is extremely important to me. I have no problem being a boolah looking for, new all-time highs, probably towards 120 to 125,000 bucks, if Bitcoin can very specifically finish May above $100,000. If it's below, you get to see you get to see something else. But if Bitcoin can of course have a short-term correction here, and then later before May is over bounce back above $100,000, that to me would be a very clear and obvious signal that Bitcoin is really going to try for new highs, and things aren't over just yet. But before we get to that, we should also talk about, of course, downside targets for this move. And I think the first way to be looking at this in the most simplistic way is just the meta signal setup over here. We spoke about this when it fired off a couple days ago. This one fired off at a just above 104,000 US dollars. The stop loss on it was a close above 105 and $300, which is very important to be aware of. It's on a closing basis, not a wick basis, because obviously it did wick above that. That's okay. It's completely fine. It's how it's designed. But we can see that the first target has already been met. That was 102,750. The second target, however, is 99,700, and the third target is 96,300. The probabilities associated with these targets are 37.5 and then 20.5 respectively. So they are lower probability for sure, but I would be looking at these as reasonable, granted all of the other things that we just looked at, pertaining to the higher term timeframes, keeping in mind that this is a 4-hour time frame. So, you would be expecting that these will work together, and you probably do get at least a second target, maybe even the third target as well. I mean, it is very low probability, like I said, but if things really do break down, that would be, I guess, the risk here. Now, the other method that we were looking at to govern downside targets was the daily HPDR, which the daily HPDR actually has now fulfilled its test to the median in exactly the way that I postulated yesterday, which is, look, the longer you go sideways here, the more and more that the median will be pulled up to current price action. And it was literally pulled up to there today, So as long as Bitcoin now is below the median, again, that is a corrective signal, but we have seen the resetting of daily volatility here. Here's the thing though. The weekly, or let's actually go to the 5-day, because the 5 days closing tonight. The 5-day is seeing a similar signal as well. And while it's not going to be, relatable for today's price action, it will be governing the next sort of general target that I'll be having on this channel. And we see the same sort of extremes or close to extremes here on the 5-day BBWP, again, representing volatility. And this is starting to finally hint at a corrective phase or contraction phase incoming here. Now, this one, again, won't actually confirm it until today's daily closure in 16 hours, 18 minutes, and 26 seconds and counting. But basically anywhere here or lower, we will see the first sort of inkling that this one is once again having a contraction phase. And if it does, then the median will once again be a target. Now, just like the daily, the longer that you trade sideways, the more and more it'll just naturally be raised up. I would not assume it's going to remain at 83,500. In fact, I can virtually guarantee you it will certainly rise probably a fair bit. But that'll be the next sort of corrective target for Bitcoin here. And by the way, regarding the daily, because it did not really have like I didn't really have like a real collapse towards the median, because the median just kind of came up to it. I would say that the likelihood of this thing at least hitting the 38.2 level, which is basically Monday's low, is almost guaranteed, and then probably even the 50% level as well, which is kind of in alignment with the meta signals target, and that is in the low 99s, or sorry, mid 99s. So I do think that those targets are actually very, very reasonable in this upcoming week. And then from there, assuming that the 5-day also confirms this, which we'll know by tomorrow, then I would say wherever the median is on the 5-day, that's going to become like a magnet for price action. Same sort of idea there. Basically, if you weren't around before, anytime we see extremes on volatility, volatility above like at least 80 percentile with these settings here, which I got a million fucking questions about. I change my settings very, very often, by the way, just like trying different things out. This one with the HPDR, I quite like these settings, but length 7, look back 100. Anyways, when we see extremes on volatility and then the contraction phase that naturally happens after that, every fucking time you get that contraction phase, price will meet the median again. In fact, I'm having a hard time like finding where that has not happened, And I mean, even going through like the past few years here, I was unable to find even once. So we'll see. I imagine that the median is going to switch up to probably a little bit above $90,000 at least on the next closure. And then of course, that would only be relevant if price action, tests it on the next, on the next closure. If price action continues to hold sideways for another period, then it'll get pulled up again. And, maybe it comes up to like 95, 96, 97,000 bucks. Again, kind of meeting with that meta signals target, but, providing some idea of where to expect this pullback to occur. And again, that all hinges upon today's closure. So it's not in there just yet. It's not confirmed just yet. But with the way that the daily looking, with the way that all of the other things that we were looking at the earlier portion of this video today, I do think that it is very likely. I'll just put it that way. Anyways, we're kind of at the end of the video here. I do want to do a quick check-in on the old quantum wave bands. Been getting like phenomenal feedback on this recently, which I'm very, very happy about because it is more designed for, newer people. It's not like the Quant Prime service, which is just, it's fucking powerful. Don't get me wrong. It's super, super powerful, but, it requires that you're maybe a little bit more advanced. Let's say this one, is a little bit more plug and play and designed to be more accessible. We'll say it's more lobotomized friendly. Anyways, it did have 6 wins in a row, which I think a lot of people got in during this time, which is great. But now we have seen 2 losses in a row. Yesterday's trade that we identified on stream was closed just recently this morning at a very small loss, but a loss nonetheless. So again, if you're playing with these tools, just understand, you're playing a game of statistics, and there's no 100%, guaranteed strategy. In fact, this one, which is in my opinion very, very good, is just above 68% strike rate, and actually quite a nice profit factor there as well. Anyways, the idea is long-term, consistent gains over time. And like I've been saying, you can try out this script for free. You can also even try out the Quant Prime if you're more advanced for free for 7 days. You don't even need a code anymore. You just go into the Teachable link in the description below, and you can just sign up, check it out for 7 days. If you like it, stay on. If you don't. And that actually will also apply to the price action pivots here, and even my most prized indicator, which is of course the HPDR, which I think is going to massively help kind of govern these downside targets for this current corrective period. So yeah. Anyways, that's a good place for me to be leaving off. As always, I want to wish everyone the best. We'll be back on with a live stream analysis tomorrow. I forgot to go over one last thing. I should probably go over an invalidation. It's the same as yesterday, to be fair. But as far as invalidations go, meaning that if this happens, Bitcoin, send it back to all-time highs, probably even new all-time highs relatively soon, would be this. Bitcoin back above that 4-hour price action pivot at just under $105,000 on a 4-hour closing basis. There's your signal basically, or there's at least my signal, and I'd be expecting price action to kind of follow through rather quickly after that. Like I said, 2 at least prior all-time highs, but if I had to bet on one direction here, I think you already guess. You can probably guess what direction I'm betting in, and of course, what sort of areas of interest on price are also relevant as well. Anyways, signing off on that note, as always, wish you the best. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully on tomorrow's live stream.